Hello, welcome back to Sit and See. I'm Dr. Jared Jones, research specialties, ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. Haven't given this caveat in a while, but just to be clear, I am a philosopher and student of religion, not a cognitive scientist, for anyone who was wondering. Although I have made that clear on a number of occasions, it's good to make it clear time and again. Right. So the Q&A portion will be a little bit shorter today because, as some of you know, I'm getting ready to do a test for FPMT to complete one of their big programs for learning the basics of Buddhism, which is a 6-year program where you study the major texts of the Indo-Tibetan tradition, uh, which even for me as a PhD has been anything but basic. It's an incredibly beneficial program. So sorry I'm a little bit late today, but we'll have to keep it a bit tight since I'm preserving my brain space for the exam. Good evening, Dave. Glad to have you here. So while I'm waiting on any questions, I'd like to talk about how to say, uh, there we go. I'd like to talk about our faults and the bad things we've done in the past and the mistakes we've made, and all of us have done things we're not proud of, right? At whatever level that is. And probably most of us feel that some of the things we've done, as I said on Neil's podcast, somebody asked me about this while we were live, but to borrow a turn of phrase from someone else, that we all at least feel like we've committed one unforgivable sin, right? We've done one thing we think, oh gosh, if people knew this, they would never talk to me again, or a person can't be forgiven for having done this, or I can't forgive myself for having done this, that sort of thing. We all have stuff like this, right? So I was having a chat of this kind with a colleague today, and it's important for everyone to remember, if you're new to Buddhism or new to meditation, according to the great systems, uh, all of your negative impulses, your negative emotions, they don't go away entirely. Negative mental states, negative emotions, negative drives to do things that harm yourself and harm others don't go away completely until you attain arhatship, until you've attained the first major goal of Buddhism, right? So when you see in the news that some great teacher did this and everyone's shocked that this, that they were embezzling money or they were sleeping with their students or this or that, it shouldn't surprise you. Unless all of these people are arhats, they have all of the drives that would cause a person to be greedy, cause a person to be angry, cause a person to be lustful. All of these drives are still there until you're an arhat. So first aspect is, it shouldn't surprise you if you train with teachers from any lineage and you notice that they have emotions. Right? If you notice some of them have some negative emotions, this is because if you're not an arhat yet, you will still have all sorts of negative emotions. But this also means that for yourself, you have to start forgiving yourself for the things that you've done in the past. You don't have to carry the weight of this. As you get better at meditation, a lot of you have come to me in the last month in particular and said, I've been meditating for 5 days doing intensive breath, and all of a sudden I can see what my mind is like, and it's horrifically bad. And the impulses I have are horrifically bad. The thoughts I have are bad. Not only that, I can see the rest of my life more clearly now, and I can see the harmful things that I've done, And it's horrifying, right? It's really horrifying to see this about myself because I didn't expect it to be like this. I thought I was doing okay. And as your mind gets more clear from having consciousness, even that has a tiny bit of concentration, you start to see how screwed up your mind is most of the time and how terrible the decisions you've made have been often, both in a habitual sense that you do small things that you do over and over again that aren't good, and in a large sense that you may look at some of your past actions and go, wow, I can't believe that I held on to that for so long as if I was right about it because I'm dead wrong. And then you have to deal with the weight of all of these things that you've done. Some of them are going to be quite bad. I'm not calling out anybody by name. Um, and just so you guys know, if we ever talk privately, unless you've told me it's okay, I'm not ever going to share your business with anybody. But it can be helpful sometimes if I share things in a general way, right? So, uh, you know, somebody mentioned to me that they had taken a bunch of vows. They had taken a bunch of vows and tantric stuff and this and that, and they've done all sorts of things. And they because they didn't know what they were doing, they broke a bunch of the vows. And that's really serious from the point of view of from a Buddhist practice. But even just practically speaking, if you're promising to do a bunch of stuff and you're not doing it, that can't possibly take you forward in terms of your spiritual practice. And probably if you made promises to do things and you're not doing it, that's probably taking you backwards, just in a normal psychological sense, right? You're, you're not cultivating better character in that way. You're probably headed the other way, right? If you're not doing what you said you were going to do, or at least not aspiring and trying to do what you said you were going to do. So I know I'm saying a couple of different things, but the first thing is that when you train in concentration, you're going to see more clearly what your mind is like, and that's going to disturb you for a period of time because it's worse than you thought. It really is. And that means you now have to deal with the fact that you're seeing how much worse it is than you thought. And quite often people will realize they aren't doing things for the reasons that they thought previously. They're doing things that are for reasons that are darker or more selfish or whatever. And that's difficult to deal with. It's actually not an easy thing. As a matter of fact, when I was looking at mindfulness research into mindfulness, one of the things they said that was quite funny about the John Kabat-Zinn's movement is that even if you're doing mindfulness, like the modern mindfulness movement, uh, there's this whole thing in the modern mindfulness movement where they said mindfulness-based stress reduction involves a lot of stress. Because first it involves seeing how screwed up the things are that you've done in the past quite often. In any case, I'm saying a couple of different things. One is that until when you see teachers in general in various lineages of meditation, Buddhist or non-Buddhist, and you find out that they have some personal problems, and some of those are like normal personal problems that a human being might have, right? Maybe they haven't done really bad things, but they have the normal kinds of things that people have. It shouldn't surprise you or throw you off in terms of your training with that person. Hey Abhishek. Hey Edit Bro. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is that when you train in meditation, you're probably going to see your own mind and your own previous decisions more clearly. And at first, that will be stressful because it's worse than you thought. Even if you've been training for a while, once you really start to get a taste of concentration, you start to notice how your mind is much different than you thought it was. And that can be stressful. So a really good sort of antidote to the stress of that is a bit of body scanning. which interestingly comes right after Foundation One. Okay, I'm sort of joking, sort of not joking. So the third aspect that I'm talking about is that each of us probably has things we've done in the past we're not proud of. And part of what you need to do as a trainee is to realize at some point in your training that all that stuff you did was before you were this person. All of these habits on the surface of the mind, you're now working to change and you've become different than you were. And part of becoming different from you were is realizing how bad and dark and ugly a huge amount of it was. You know, thinking about your youth, maybe you start to notice, wow, I was mostly driven by attachment to my pleasure and temporary things and fear and aggression and envy and violent thoughts and these kinds of things and blah blah blah. And I chased a bunch of those things and did a bunch of stuff that I shouldn't have done and that I regret. Right? This is most people's story in one flavor or another, and some people dive further into one aspect than another, but this is most people's story. Unless you grew up in like a really conservative household where they never let you do anything that people get into when they're young, you know? So this can be, I mean, yeah, John, you don't have to have meditation to come to this realization. But the point is that quite often people will come to that realization when they're older and they sort of calm down a bit. But probably over a period of 5 to 10 days, doing 5 minutes of intensive breath meditation a day, this will start to occur to you. This will become part of your experience for a lot of people. So it makes this process that for some people, not for everyone, but for some people happens just as they get older. It makes it happen very quickly, sort of all of a sudden. So for those who are here, just take a moment to really think about the fact that if you've been training a bit and now it seems like your mind is worse or it seems like your past actions seem more negative than they ever have to you and so on and so forth, this is a great sign, actually. It's a great sign that you're able to look back and see, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that anymore. This means you're moving forward. You're becoming something better. This is a fantastic time. So even though there will be times where it seems dark, you can actually be encouraged by the fact that now you're seeing it clearly, and in the past you weren't seeing it clearly. Okay. Hello, Hans. Welcome. Yeah, it depends on the person. Depends on the person, depends on what's going on in their life. Depends on if they've hit a brick wall in terms of their life because of their poor decisions or not. A lot of people hit a brick wall in their 20s or their early 30s, and then life sort of shows them that they can't carry on the way that they had in the past, and that gives them some clarity. But it's a bit nicer to sit down for 5 minutes a day and do an activity that's not too difficult and forego hitting a brick wall. Well, no, John, that's actually not true. That's the wonderful thing we've learned about meditation training in general is that meditation training increases your neuroplasticity. And in fact, not that you have to change, but the Buddhist sort of approach to this is look at the things in you that are causing harm to yourself, causing harm to others, and not taking you towards the highest possible meaning that you can imagine and make those less through training. And the things that take you towards greater meaning, more peace and happiness for yourself, more benefit for yourself, more benefit for others, more peace and happiness for others. Those things that are working really well, make those more through training, right? It's it's a bit sort of commonsensical. The aspect, the emotional palette you have is not fixed in stone at all. The trouble is that you think you are your mental content, and you're not your mental content. You think you are the habits coming from the past. You're not the habits coming from the past. And that's not something I need to prove to you through a bunch of logical arguments. If you do the practices, this will become obvious to you. And then you can decide to change them or not. But you probably will want to change them because they're not what you are and they're disturbing for both you and other beings. And they're not taking you towards any kind of higher purpose. They're just screwing you up and screwing other people out. So, uh, I have dealt with people that have mental decline before, and one of the things that is added on, and then we got to do some practice after this question. But one of the things, oh, sorry, Abhishek asked if desire is always motivated by selfish desire, motives is always bad. Desire motivated by selfish motives doesn't always lead to bad outcomes, but it's always disturbing for your mind, right? Sometimes you're selfish and you want to get a lot of money, and so you work really hard and get a lot of money, and that was good for your wallet. And then maybe also you feel good because you have plenty of resources to do various things. That's all fine. But having that desire driving your mind all the time isn't pleasant. It's not an enjoyable state of mind, which is why you want to do something to fix the lack that you're feeling. But we actually use this in Buddhist psychology too. We use desire all the time. We use desire in Buddhism all the time to do things that are useful. There's nothing wrong with desire if it's pointed at things that actually work. If it's pointed at something that doesn't work, then that's a big problem. So, John, in regards to the aging and so forth, but part of the how old am I? I'm 40. Part of the aspects, one of the aspects that comes through the Shaolin tradition and comes through the Tibetan tantras and so forth is that you should actually spend a fair amount of time working on your body and working on the things that give you more vitality so that your body and your mind function as best as possible as you get older. Because you're absolutely right. If you run out of sort of, as the old timers say, zhuzh, if you run out of juice, then, or if you get really sick with a type of sickness that could have been avoided, well, then you lose a bunch of time. You lose a bunch of time you could have used to do something meaningful, even in a conventional sense. Is meditation escapism? No, meditation is the opposite of escapism. It's taking a good hard look at yourself, seeing what actually works, seeing what doesn't actually work, and putting in serious time, hard work, and effort into cultivating the causes for more stuff that actually works and cultivating the antidotes for more stuff that actually doesn't work. Okay. What you say about meditation, changing my seems ugly and immoral and scary, seems kind of scary. The previous being is being erased in some way. It's already being erased. You're going to die. All right, my friends. I want to remind the chat that the chat is for questions about your personal meditation. That's what this class is. I also do open Q and A's where you can ask whatever you'd like and say whatever you'd like. But this is now fourth session in a row, John, if I may, where I've been as kind as I can in saying the topics you're raising aren't the topic of this particular class. Sit and see, which is about, as I put in the comment section almost every time we start, asking questions about your personal practice of meditation. So if you want to learn about meditation, you're welcome to ask questions so that you can do the practices. But if you have no interest in training in meditation, then this might not be the right class for you, which is fine. No problem. It's just not the right class. You don't like meditation, you don't think it works, you think it's all stupid, no problem. But if you don't have questions about your personal practice and you're not asking questions in order to put the answers into practice, this isn't the right class for you. You can come to an open Q&A and I'll answer whatever questions you have about practice and blah blah blah, no problem. But I only do this class generally for an hour. So if people ask questions about all sorts of things, then we're not talking about the subject. Okay. So uh Abhishek, regarding all of this stuff, again, same thing. If you're not interested in training in meditation, it's okay. No one's going to force you to train in meditation. No problem. But if you don't have questions about your personal practice of meditation, then save the comments and questions and so forth for an open Q&A. That's all. I mean, it's pretty simple, you know? Okay. What's the best way to get started with meditation? Postmodern. We're actually about to start a session right now. Yeah, so Yeze, this is actually how Buddhist psychology deals with this is when you there's a differentiation in Buddhist psychology between regret and guilt. So guilt is you did something wrong in the sense that that thing harms you and harms other beings or harms other beings, right? So consider it like this. When you do something that harms you, harms other beings, and you go, I'm bad, I'm terrible, I don't deserve anything good because I'm bad and terrible and I'm dark and I'm evil, right? This is this is in the vicinity, let's say, of guilt, where you're seeing yourself as bad and dark and evil because of the actions that were performed, right? In Buddhist psychology, that state of mind is considered to be absolutely useless and unhelpful. It doesn't help you overcome that previous negative action. It just adds more negativity, it adds more wood to the fire, basically. On the other hand, like you said, if you're honestly recognizing and you go, this action was really bad. I'm not doing that again. I'm making a strong determination to not do that thing again. This is, as you said, overall positive, even though it's uncomfortable, even though regret is not a comfortable feeling, and resolve maybe mixed, depending on how. I think resolve is a bit more positive, but regret can be an uncomfortable feeling. So, yeah, on the whole, it's a net positive. Okay. Uh, we are. So we'll do just probably one short session because, like I said, I've got to hop off a little bit, basically on time today. My apologies, my friend. Okay, let's see. So in terms of basic meditation, we'll do the 5-minute breath practice that I teach. Yeah, Abhishek, if you have general questions and so forth and things you're curious about and whatever, you can put them in the Discord and other people can answer or I can answer or, just that sit and see is because it's sort of a tight schedule, so to speak. Everybody is probably good to hear this at least once. I haven't said it in a while. Sit and see, generally, I try to keep it into an hour. And that is roughly 20, 30 minutes of answering questions and around 30 minutes of practice, right? Sometimes a little less, a little more, depending on how things are squeezed in, but an hour. So if there's a lot of stuff not related to people's practice and that comes to dominate the discussion or the chat or whatever, and then inside the chat, people are then having all these debates and discussions and all sorts of stuff, then the questions that could have been answered about people's actual practice, which is the whole point of this class, don't get asked, don't get answered, don't get attention because other stuff is coming up. Which, as you guys all know, I'm very, very happy to talk about all sorts of stuff in open Q and A's and on Discord and on the Facebook page and everywhere, all day, all the time, as long as I'm not doing something else, right? But this class in particular is to help people with their actual practice, so it's important. It's important that the chat stay relatively sort of clean in regards to the questions being asked and so forth, so that we can continue to cover issues related to meditation, like, for example, regret and resolve, and your past actions. This is directly related to people's practice in the last month or so of people talking to me. So this is what I mean. So I'm not scolding anyone or anything, besides maybe John a little bit. uh, okay, let's see. Body scan. Okay, so body scanning with progressive release is a Neigong practice where you're gaining an internal skill of not only getting your mind into a place, but then releasing the muscles and so forth that you find in that place. It's a perfectly good practice if that's what you intended to do when you sat down. The key skill of meditation is doing what you intended to do. That's the key skill. So if you sat down and said, I'm going to go through the body and release as I go, then do the whole thing and release as you go. But if you sat down and then didn't like how the body felt and decided halfway through to start releasing as you go, now you're not doing what you set out to do when you started the practice. So now it's not meditative practice, it's you just responding to what you found when you looked in the body, which is the opposite of the practice. The practice is whatever happens to be there, you simply become aware of it, right? That's what you intended to do. And instead, you got in there and you went, I don't like what I found here. I'm going to change it. See what I mean? So it's actually a really good question and a really important question. The answer is yes, you can definitely do that. But in terms of training, as being a person who's actually training in meditation, you want to make sure that you do what you set out to do. Same thing. If you set the intent that I'm going to scan through the body and then I'm going to stop when I find an area my mind can't get into, and then I'm only going to carry on after I've settled my mind there for a couple of breaths or whatever, right? No problem. But if you started the session saying, I'm going to go through my body at an relatively even pace, right? Or that I'm going to follow the pattern that I do, right? That I teach you guys. I'm going to follow that pattern with a couple of places where we slow down. And that's what I'm going to do. And then you get partway through it and you go, oh, I can't see into into the back side of my ribs where the gap is between my hips and the rib. I can't see that. And then you stop there and you just focus on it. Imagine it's like a visual image, that your body inside in terms of tactile sensations like a visual image, and you set the intent that I'm going to move my eyes like this, and I'm not going to stop until I get over here, right? And then you start going like this, and then you go, ooh, what's that? Right? It's like the yeah, you set a clear intent. Here's what I'm doing. So even with tactile sensation, you don't want to be like a dog that sees a squirrel, right? Where you go, okay, I'm doing the thing I set out to do. I'm just scanning through the body, looking at each piece without getting involved in what I find. Oh, squirrel. Oh, look at that. I can't see in there. What is that? Well, is it like this or is it like that? Is my elbow like this? If blah 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 blah. Oh, it's tense. What if I release it too? Oh, okay. Blah, 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 blah. And then suddenly you're doing like 17 different things in the session you didn't intend to do, which is actually sort of like being a tourist inside the body. That's not training in anything. You understand? I hope this doesn't sound harsh because it's a great question. It's a really good question. But if you imagine your tactile ability to see, to experience tactile stuff, feeling, if you imagine it like vision, it becomes really clear why you shouldn't screw around with what you intended to do. Because again, imagine that you intended, I'm going to look at this thing, and then I'm going to look at this thing, then I'm going to look at this thing, and then I'm going to look at this one, and I'm going to spend 5 seconds on each one. And then you get halfway through and you go, oh, what's that over there? That's interesting. Right? Clearly, you're no longer training in concentration. You're just sort of whatever's interesting, you stop there and then you take a little break. And it got a little tense halfway through, so I'm just going to relax and stare at my hand for a minute, and then I'll go back to looking at this thing over here. You understand? All of a sudden, it's not training your mind anymore. It's just being a tourist and looking around inside your body. So this is a big mistake people make about body scanning stuff. Uh, generally, I don't with body scanning. Generally, I just do a type of scan at a speed where I know I'm going to stop around 10 minutes. Like if you do the big parts of the body, it'll take about 10 minutes. If you divide things up a little more, it'll take about 20, 25 minutes. If you divide it up even more, which I don't think I've ever done in this class, it'll take 50 minutes or an hour. And if you divide it up into really small parts, it'll take 90 minutes or 2 hours. And so you just sort of know how much time you have and you divide it up according to how much time you have, which takes a bit of experience, I suppose. Okay, so we'll just do intensive breath today since we have a beginner in the room who wanted the basic practice, postmodern. You still here, postmodern? And then for folks who were here yesterday and throughout the week, I don't know if you noticed, but we've been escalating a little bit throughout the week. So we'll do just a few minutes of visual awareness, just to carry on with cycling through the different sensory organs after we do intensive breath. But for those who are new, don't worry if you can't do it, because this is actually about 3/4 of the way through the syllabus of stuff that I teach. If you'd like to learn it all in order rather than sort of piece by piece, then you can look at the actual course materials on my YouTube where I teach it, or you can join the school course if you'd like to support what I'm doing financially. Okay, all right. So intensive breath. You're going to bring. This will sound unusual to those of you who are new, but don't 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 worry about it. uh, oh, Siddhartha, hello. Sorry, I didn't even see you come in. And Cookie, hello. Uh, so intensive breath, most meditation techniques that you're taught are meant, in my opinion, to function in retreat, which is why they're gentle. If you try to do intensive breath for 8 hours a day, you'll run out of steam and you can't do it because it requires a great deal of forceful intention. If you are meditating 8 or 10 hours a day for 7 days and not stirring your mind up in between sessions, you can just let your mind settle down for the first 2 or 3 days. And then the mind will start behaving itself as you try to do other things in the retreat. So that's a perfectly viable option. Works really well, no problem. In real life, You're starting with an extremely distracted mind that you've been stirring up all day, all week, all month, all year without ever letting it settle down in the relevant way that you would in retreat. So you need a forceful technique to meet the force of these great distractions in your mind. So this is intensive breath meditation. It comes through my Zen tantric yogi teacher from the main sort of training part of my life prior to moving to the UK. He was holding a lineage in his Zen lineage and was highly regarded by the Geluk tantric authorities as well. So highly accomplished practitioner in two different lineages. So very simple 5 minute practice. And it will sound unusual if you've heard of other kinds of meditation because it's not relaxing at all. So what you're going to do, you just breathe in through the nose and find a patch of skin where the sensations are the most intense, where you can feel the most sensations when you breathe normally. When you find that patch of skin, your task is with as much force as you can, every cell in your body, every thought, every ounce of you, you will press and try to squeeze into that tiny patch of skin until there's nothing but that tiny patch of skin. The only other thing you're going to do is in between the in breath and out breath, you're going to count from 1 to 7, 7 to 0. Since we're only doing this for about 5 minutes, stay completely and absolutely still, with the caveat, with the exception that you can move your body a little bit if you need to when you get to 0. Other than that, don't move your body. Keep your mind fully absorbed with great force on that patch of skin inside or near one of your nostrils. Okay? Also, when I say begin, don't delay, don't move around, don't think about it, don't wiggle around and then get to it. As soon as you tell your mind, now is the time, now is the time. You understand? As soon as you say, mind, go here now, it goes. It has to go right away. This is the skill you're gaining. Not that my mind fucks around and does whatever it wants and then it goes. As soon as you say go, it goes. This is a skill you need to gain to be a competent meditator. Okay? So as soon as I say begin, every ounce of you, bang, immediately to that patch of skin and the counting. Okay? So 3, 2, 1, begin. Those of you who are new, this will be a bit difficult, but you're welcome to give it a try. So open your eyes, and I want you to try to zoom out with your awareness. So putting your eyes in the center of the visual field, which means that you're not looking up, you're not looking down, you're not looking to the left, you're not looking to the right, you're looking straight ahead. You're going to let your mind zoom out until you can see the entire visual field. Now, while you're looking at the entire visual field, we're going to do a number of exercises to open the field, to make the field more available, and to begin the process, which won't be completed today, of course, but begin the process of taming the visual aspect of your awareness and giving you access to what your vision actually is. So this comes from the Mahamudra tradition for those who are interested. Don't look at anything in front of you in particular, just gaze forward. So you're not selecting any particular object to look at with the eyes. You're going to look first at the center of the vision with your awareness, as if the visual awareness is the screen of a computer or a television, and your awareness is your eyes. So your mental awareness, it can move around inside your vision. Just to show this to you from your own experience, I'm sure at some point in your life there was somebody sitting nearby and you didn't want to look at them, and so you sort of looked at them using your peripheral vision, you know, where you sort of look kind of in their direction but not at them, and then you look through your peripheral vision at them using your awareness, right? So our awareness, our mental awareness, has the ability to move around inside the visual field without the visual field moving. So you'll keep the eyes pointed forward, and your mind, your awareness, will move to the center of the field. And then pull the mind backwards and look at the things that are closest to the visual field, which I'm going to call backward, behind, back, backward direction. So the things that are closest to the field will probably, for some of you, be your eyebrows, your eyebrow ridges, your eye sockets, eyelashes, nose. So just let your awareness become aware of the things that are closest to the vision. Next, letting go of that, become aware of everything that is to the left in the visual field. So let your awareness swim over to the left until you become aware of the left peripheral field. And then let your awareness swim to the right. And let it swim upwards. And let it swim downwards. Now, once again, this will be difficult for those of you who are new, but you're welcome to give it a try. Become aware of two directions at once. So front and back, that'll be the center of the visual field and the parts that are closest to your eyes. So become aware of both of those simultaneously. And become aware, releasing that, become aware of left and right simultaneously. Releasing that, become aware of up and down simultaneously. And once again, for those of you who are new, this will be unusual. Probably from staring in the same direction for a while, you might be seeing geometric shapes. You might be seeing, especially if you're getting much of your attentional awareness into the eyes, you might start to see white light or gold light, or sort of things might seem unusual in your vision. That's all normal, and it'll go away when you move your eyes, but don't move your eyes, keep them where they are. And don't focus on all of the weird stuff that's happening in your visual field because we're meditating on vision, or the weird things that happen just because you're looking in one direction. Just continue to focus on the very fact of vision, just the fact that the vision is there. You're not looking at particular things, you're just opening the awareness in the directions that exist. So now we're going to open the awareness in all six directions simultaneously. If you can't do that, then just do up, down, left, and right. But I'm going to take you through it. So begin with front and back, without losing that. Add on left and right. Without losing that, add on up and down. Refresh the directions. If you're only doing four, then just do up, right, left, down. If you're doing all six, then follow along with me. Front and back, left, right, up, down. Okay. So this is practice number 2 in the 6 aspects of Mahamudra practice that I teach. The first one would be becoming aware of the entire body in a similar way that you just became aware of the eyes, but we didn't cover that one today. And then you would move on to do the other senses until all 5 external senses were tame like this. They can be aware of the entirety of the content in the field without getting pulled in by different parts of that sensory experience. And then, as you might imagine, from this little taste of trying to do this, or actually doing it maybe for some of you, that once each of your external senses isn't getting pulled out or distracted by and involved with what's occurring in that field, once that's not happening, then your ability to grab all of that bandwidth and pull the awareness from the five senses into the central mind and then be aware of the mind itself, it's going to be much easier. Once the five external senses are more tame, it'll be much easier to do that kind of practice, like observing the contents of consciousness or trying to experience consciousness itself. Yeah. Also, for those of you who have been around for a few months, you can take this practice into other things you do. So one of the wonderful things about Mahamudra practice and the four techniques that I teach spread across five different types of practice. The wonderful thing about Mahamudra is you can take this kind of practice anywhere. So eventually you can be sitting at a business meeting, right? And you're listening with full attention, you're listening, but you open the auditory field. And you're looking, but you open the visual field. And because you've trained, you can look around the room with the visual field open, the auditory field open. It doesn't look like you're doing anything, but you're training at a pretty serious level, training concentration and taming your external senses, right? So this kind of technique, according to the classics, is really fantastic, both for beginners, for the reasons I already described, and experts and advanced meditators, because this kind of technique can take you really far down the path of training. Being able to have a general antidote to most of your negative states of mind that you can apply anywhere while doing anything that isn't noticeable by the people around you is a really powerful, advanced, incredible kind of technique, right? So this is why I selected it amongst many other options for the techniques that I teach in a secular context. It also doesn't require you to believe in celestial Buddhas or or to get a tantric empowerment or to do years of Nadon practice. So it's something that you can do in a basically a secular or an interreligious context. It doesn't matter what you believe. That will allow you to make a lot of progress, legitimate progress, training and meditation uh, in a relatively short period of time, like within a few years instead of a few decades. Right. Well, my friends, it looks like there are no new questions that have come in since we stopped that practice. Maybe you're all just blissing out on the non duality of vision. Ah, so if you are seeing things that the eyes can't see, then you're not focusing on vision. Hey, Earth, welcome. So, vision is your eyes. Your eyes see physical stuff. So, your eyes detect colors and shapes based upon light hitting the eye. So if you're seeing things that are beyond what the eye can see, then you're not using your eyes, assuming that you're not imagining things that aren't actually there. So Mahamudra, visual practice with the visual should be the actual physical stuff that's appearing in front of you. It shouldn't be like looking through the walls or something, because your eyes can't see through the wall. Okay. What makes up the mind? The mind is defined as that which is clear and knowing, sometimes clear, knowing, and luminous. The mind is like space, but it gives rise to experience, i.e., it's luminous and it knows experience. In other words, it's knowing. So what is it made up of? It's non-physical and uh it's made up of, for lack of a better term, mental moments. According to Buddhist psychology, it's made up of, how to say, It's made up of a number of phenomena that are clear and knowing, a number of different kinds of phenomena that are all clear and knowing. Okay, I'm glad to hear that you're getting something out of the class. And like I said, in this class, generally speaking, I don't teach in order. I teach little bits of different things to give people a taste. And uh, if you want to train in order, you can go to the meditation course that I have here on YouTube, and it's the same material that I teach in my school course. Uh, a school course, you get a little bit of experience, or sorry, you get a little bit of community, and so on and so forth. But some Lohan palms. Lohan palms much more interesting if you have someone to do it with. I can soon. Neil's going to come out here for a visit, and we're going to do some stuff. And Neil's going to throw me around the room. If you want to see, I wonder if that's around somewhere. I was trying to find. There's a video of me doing push hands somewhere, and it's maybe worth seeing. It's a bit entertaining. My teacher put it up somewhere. Anyways, yeah, it was not so interesting to just see somebody doing forms and things. Okay. If you wanted to see some Lohan Palm in general, I'll put this up. Let's see. Whoa. No way. Cool. Sorry, folks. Give me just a sec. Let's see. So 18 Lohan. 18 Lohan. Where are you? Oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. Yeah, so here's Neil doing the form. So that's the form, but what makes it sort of work is hard to see. Actually, I was having a pretty good conversation with one of my teachers about this yesterday, or the yeah what day is it? Jesus, 2 days ago, and we were talking about, for example, you can't see it on the outside because you train to build up various kinds of skills. So, for example, uh, I don't know how to show this on camera, but for example, this is my arm when I'm not doing anything with the arm. And now I've put a huge amount of pressure on the front of the arm and slightly less pressure on the inside of the arm. And if you were standing here and you were feeling my arm would feel completely different to you. And so when you see Neil doing stuff, part of what you're doing is you're learning how to pull really long chains of connection that run through the body and all sort of collect in the center part of the body, and you learn how to grab onto those using the inter-abdominal muscles, for example, and you pull them like this by squeezing the bag at the bottom of the abdomen. And that, so for example, because that tissue connects to here, I can grab that tissue and pull it and make this firm, even though it's relaxed, right? Like you can see it's relaxed, but it's completely firm because I've grabbed that tissue and pulled to make it remain in place. And so this is part of, for example, how you'd issue force through a limb that isn't the limb that's issuing the force, because the limb is relaxed. And then you can use it almost like a guitar string, where you strike the string and a vibration goes through. You can use it like this. And so this is part of why internal arts stuff looks really weird, right? Because you're not using the normal way that the body works to generate the power for most of the power that you're creating, which is also why people think it's not a real thing. But I've trained a bit in jujitsu. I've trained a bit in judo with a pretty good judo guy that trained Olympic athletes to do judo. I've trained in external martial arts and not very much, but a little bit of MMA, and you know, I've trained in a whole bunch of stuff. It's uh, internal arts really do work. Also, the guy that I'm training with here in Edinburgh, he trains. He's trained a lot of internal arts, like Lohan, and he's also trained Lohan. But he also teaches the Edinburgh Sumo Club, and some of his guys have ranked. I don't know if it's nationally. No, I think no, it's definitely internationally. Have ranked internationally competing for sumo, and they're not all big fat guys, right? It's like a wrestling style. So, anyways, he's a very competent person who can fight really big dudes that want to do him harm and throw him around. And he also does this internal stuff and says that it works, right? So there are very competent people. Neil Ripsky is the same way. He can do all this stuff that looks like it shouldn't do anything, but if he were to use it on you, you'd be very uncomfortable, to put it mildly. Anyway, so Lohan Palm, just in brief, for those of you who don't know, because a bunch of you are new, Elizabeth. Hey, welcome, Elizabeth. Cookie, welcome. So Lohan Palm is a system of internal cultivation where it incorporates an internal martial arts aspect, right? And then behind that is increasingly subtle techniques and so forth, where you're I don't know how to say it without saying a lot of stuff, but everything that you get from yoga, you get through what's called doyin, which is guiding and pulling. It's basically stretching practices and practices of patting the body to break up tension in various parts of the body, and self massage and that sort of thing to break up tension and make things work better. So that's one small aspect. And then another aspect is, once you've done that, making all those connections really strong and making them work well. Another aspect is all of the health practices that you can bake into it at the same time, so that if you live to be old, that everything works really well. And then the whole system is designed, actually, in addition to all of that, if in case somebody tries to fight you, you have a few skills to defend yourself if you need them. You have, in theory, good health and long life, because you're doing the stuff that makes the body last a long time, as long as you don't get hit by a bus. And all of that is geared to make you better at meditation when you go to try to meditate. And then finally, all of these practices make the body more comfortable when you go to meditate. So now the body's more comfortable, and you've built the skills you need with your mind to actually do meditation training. And that's just meditation. Then there's a final aspect called Neidan, internal alchemy, that's shared in common between the Shaolin temple and the Taoist traditions, which is basically Buddhist Tantra without the Tantra. So working with the subtlest parts of you to make progress in meditation and everything else you're trying to do with cultivation towards, let's call them, higher goals of spiritual practice, to make all of those things happen more quickly, more easily, more profoundly. And so 18 Lohan is a complete one package system to have basically your yoga practice, your meditation practice, your cultivation practice, qigong, neigong, all under one roof. This is why I've partnered with him, because I do a huge amount. I do a huge amount of those kinds of practices, but I don't teach them. And then I teach this stuff I'm teaching all of you for the meditation part. And me and Neil got together and I was like, dude, why don't I take my stuff and we'll teach your people how to do really good meditation as lay people in the real world? And then we will build the whole system of Lohan on, or build my stuff onto the Lohan sort of stream, so that you're learning how to do all this while doing all the other parts that make it work even better. And it's taking you somewhere that, if you did Lohan for 6 or 7 years, your ability to do Buddhist Tantra would be much better, for example, because you're learning to work with all the same stuff. Or if you wanted to go through the Lohan version of Nadon and then go do a Nadon system from another Taoist lineage, for those of you who are inclined that way, fantastic. So, anyways, yeah, that's Lohan. I'll put it in the chat. And if you're martially inclined and you like weird stuff like push hands, uh, if you like weird stuff like push hands and all of that, push hands is really interesting. Let me tell you guys a little bit about this, and this will be the last thing of the day, I think. What did Tsongkhapa say about it? There's a lot of stuff that, like at the monasteries, they had martial arts guys in Tibet, and they had people that knew how to fight and stuff. Like, these people were around, and then some of them became great scholars and practitioners, and some of them didn't. Okay. So let me just talk about push ends briefly as it relates to training and meditation and all this to keep it relevant. So in push hands, you're retraining your nervous system so that when there's pressure on your system, when there's spontaneous stuff happening in your perception, and there's pressure on your system, that under pressure, under increasing pressure, increasing difficulty, you can learn how to make the nervous system less reactive in a similar way that we were working with vision. And to do that requires a huge amount of concentration. And therefore, you also train your mind to do something similar to meditation by doing push hands, because you're training the mind through your body to be less reactive to stimulus in a similar way as we were just doing with vision. While although it seems like you're doing a lot of stuff, what you're learning to do actually is abide in the natural condition without your condition being able to be altered from the outside, which is part of why, again, it looks so weird when you see people who are extremely good at push hands and they're not just doing wrestling, basically. It looks really, what they're doing doesn't look normal, because again, the principles they're using aren't the ones that you would expect. The principle is the mind never gets disturbed by what's happening, and it never butts in and tries to force something to happen on the other side, and it never runs away from what the opponent is doing, and it always maintains a consistent condition. And therefore it's free to do what it would like to do, which means your mind is free inside of this condition that seems otherwise quite controlled, and that's how you can issue force in the midst of being pushed and so forth. So again, these things are directly related, in my opinion, to training and meditation for those who are so inclined. Thank you for coming, Hans. Glad to have you. For the rest of yous, so the end game for a complete cultivation system like Lohan is that you would have enough martial skill that if you got attacked, you probably won't die, which is a helpful thing, because if you die, your training ends for this life, right? So you should be able to do stuff to defend yourself without hurting the other person, without hurting yourself, ideally, right? So this is the type of skill that Lohan is eventually training you to have in theory. Secondly, you need to have a body that works really well and is comfortable for meditation, for long periods of meditation, between 4 and 16 hours of meditation a day, right? And also, you need a technique that allows you, when you're doing extended practice, where you're doing 10 hours or 12 hours or 16 hours of practice a day, as us weirdos are wont to do on occasion. You need to have a technique that makes the body really comfortable again really quickly so that you can go back and do your next session and have a good quality session because the body's not distracted by pain and tension and so forth. And then also Lohan explicitly incorporates a system where you're adding, I know it's hard to describe, but Nadon and some tantric techniques, you're basically adding more vitality to the system. So you have more power, you have more juice, more get up and go, as they say in the old days. You have more get up and go that allows you to do the stuff you need to do. And you have techniques for cultivating more of that sort of feeling and capability. And as you have more of that, and you can sort of, for lack of a better term, pool it in one location, it also increases your concentration as a byproduct. So this is then qigong and neigong kinds of activities where you're learning to work with vital forces and see exactly, Jay. This is the brilliant thing. This is the brilliant thing. If you work with a system that teaches you how to get all parts of you pointed one direction, everything starts to happen faster. And this is the other brilliant thing. The results from your practice stick around longer because less of you is running the opposite way. Do you see what I mean? So as you make progress and you're pushing every ounce of you to go this way, if your body and your energy system are running this way, then the results go bang and they don't stay very long. But if you accomplish a new level of capability and the body was already there and the energy system was already there, you just stay there and you don't fall back down. So this is the brilliant part about working with all of the major elements making you up and pointing them all the same way. This is the brilliance of Shaolin. I mean, that's in part of it's the chi. Yeah. Part of it's chi, part of it's the body, part of it's things that are subtler than chi once you get a little bit further along. Yeah. But you're learning, and with rumination, as you know, Jay, because you've gone a little further in my system than some other people, with rumination, you point your emotions in the same direction, right? You point all of your emotions in your intellectual life also in the same direction. So now, see how the momentum is picking up, right? So things happen faster, easier, less obstacles. That's the point. I'm really glad you said that because that's exactly the point. That's exactly it. What is the end game? Oh no, I answered that. Wisdom increase, compassion increase. So there's some debate about that, luck. There's some debate about whether through simply working with the body and the energy body alone, you can increase wisdom and compassion. Yeah, exactly, man, Jay. That's exactly it. And this is why in the course materials, Jay, I said you actually work on all three layers from the beginning. You're just focused on the body first, right? But you can already feel it. If you do the standing, for example, you're already working on qigong. You're already working on cultivating more life energy, basically, right? And you're going to feel more alive. And because there's more life energy, the mind will be more stable because you're training it to be stable, etc. Right? So you're already working on all three right from the beginning, but you're mainly working on the body in the beginning. And then you're mainly working on the chi in the middle. You're mainly working on the mind in the end. And then you're working on the subtlest aspects once you've worked on all that, because there are subtler layers. Anyways, I digress. Um, luck, I tend to think that wisdom and compassion don't increase directly as a result of working with the body and the energy system. This is my humble opinion, and I could be wrong. Yeah, you might need to do some stuff to calm the system down. uh, Also, Jay, well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. The system is meant to balance you, right? And you only have a tiny piece of it so far. So there's more coming. Uh, so I tend to think that things like this, where like Jay is talking about, you build up the body in a particular way, you build up the energy system in a particular way, you build up the mind in a particular way, you point them all in the same direction. Then when you add on rumination meditation, for example, with this now supercharged system that's all headed the same way, and you say, okay, now supercharged system, let's be compassionate. Let's ruminate on the causes of compassion. And then the compassion is coming much more powerfully because there's less in the way. Same thing, you start doing Vipassana practice, and there's so much more of you that can do the practice than if you were just brute forcing it with your mind, because your body's cooperating, your energy system's cooperating, your mind's cooperating, and now you're trying to develop wisdom with a concentrated mind. And again, I think the likelihood that it's going to happen much faster is quite high. So not that it directly increases because of this, but I think indirectly it's a big support. And from the very small amount that I know of Buddhist Tantra, they make the same arguments basically, from what I've seen, which is not very much. Okay. All right, my friends. I think I've covered enough of the weirdness, get in trouble when people turn up asking about the force. And that's not if you have things like that in your head, it'll probably stop you from doing the real thing. So that's not what I want. It's not what I want. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Jay, glad you're getting a lot out of my stuff and the other stuff you're doing and the Lohan. I think that's a good blend of stuff of ingredients you have there, and I'm glad that it's working. Very glad it's working. And for those of you who are newer or just getting in, Jay has been here since I decided to more or less go public. Jay's been here virtually from the beginning, and how to say, you know, I mean, he can say it for himself, but it seems to be going well. So the things that I teach, I've really done my best. To just let me just say this, and then we'll wrap it up. I've really done my best. I was having a big conversation with some other Buddhists today, and I've really done my best to take years of struggle, years of study, years of stuff not working, years of not being able to figure out why is it, even though I'm exerting a lot of effort, etc., why is it that these things aren't producing the results the way that the texts said they should produce results? And then I realized most of the texts aren't written for training in real life. They're written for training in retreat. And as soon as that clicked, and I started emphasizing in my own practice and in the things I teach, the things that I had gotten from lay practitioners who were great lay practitioners doing their practice in the real world, recognized in their own lineages of practice as accomplished beings. And I started lining those up and thinking about, okay, how would a person develop these skills in order based upon the cognitive scientific research, the classic texts, living in real life instead of retreat? And I started putting them in order. And I started teaching them in that order. And other lay people started telling me that they've trained in other stuff for years. They train in my stuff, and things happen almost right away. And then within a few months, they're telling me that deeper things are happening. And then a few months later, they're telling me that they're having non-dual experiences, and so on and so on and so on. I'm going, okay, so it's not just me. Other people are having the same struggle. Other people are having the same failures and confusions. So maybe if I do this and open it up, it'll help more people, you know? So that's how we ended up here. And I genuinely I hope that you don't have to go through the struggles and so forth that I did. I hope you don't have to go through the long periods of trying stuff hours a day or whatever and having it not work. I hope you can shortcut straight basically to where I have ended up, wherever that is. And then with a bit of luck, if you have a good lineage and you're training in like a full-on lineage of something somewhere, from there you can then go all the way in whatever it is you want to pursue as your main lineage. Soto Zen, Advaita, Eastern Orthodox, doesn't matter to me as long as you're headed down a path of genuine spiritual transformation, it's fine by me, you know? Okay. All right. Thank you all for being here. Wish me luck for tomorrow. And yeah, I'll see you later. Oh, actually, two more things. Do force powers actually exist? Yes. Yes, they do. Will you have them if you want them? Probably not. Probably you need to do a whole bunch of things that are absolutely unrelated to such things for a couple of decades, and then they start to happen. And then you realize that they don't matter at all, and your teachers go, if you ask me about this again, don't come back for a while. But yeah, I mean, these are in all the classics, right? There's a reason that this stuff is in all the classic texts. Okay, I digress. Okay, Buddhist techniques. Okay, yeah, word. Yeah. I mean, just last thing, and this will be it unless something grabs my attention. So word, exactly right. One of the things in full on pagan practice that I've seen since it has elements, right? It has elements of an old tradition that I think is probably working with all of these elements that all the other religions say are there, right? One of the things you find in sort of the, let's say, the neo classics, the new classics, since it was basically oral tradition and they had to reconstruct everything, is that to make everything else work, what do you need? Highly concentrated, quiet mind. That's the first major ingredient, or it's among the top 10 ingredients, right? Of course it is. How could you make anything happen beyond the ordinary if you didn't have this quality of mind that, right, that can make things happen that aren't ordinary? And in a sense, it doesn't matter where you went to learn how to get your mind to do this and to access these other parts that make you up and so on and so forth. But basically everyone is saying if you'd like to eventually end up at mystical experience, if you'd like to end up at things that are beyond the ordinary, concentration is the doorway. Real concentration is the doorway to all of this stuff that you find in the text that seems like mythology. Sounds like mythology until you've been around for a couple decades and hung out with practitioners, and then they start doing that stuff. And you go, "Oh, I thought that was an analogy. I guess that's not an analogy." You know, poor me, Mr. PhD guy around all the other skeptical academics and blah blah blah. Of course, from the beginning, I put it on the shelf and I hoped it might be real, but it took years of knowing practitioners before I actually saw or experienced anything that was beyond the ordinary. So, for those of you who'd like to eventually one day see some of the weird things that I may or may not have seen, go to real lineages and hang out with great practitioners and get to know them with no expectation and genuinely train. And eventually, if they know you well and it's worth doing and it's helpful for you and they have the capability, they'll show you stuff or not. But actually, at the end of the day, it won't matter to you because if you train in stuff, the things you actually want, like a mind that works better and the ability to not be a prick all the time and whatever, that starts to happen. This is what you actually want. So whether or not you can use chi powers to move someone across the room is not the point. Okay, so Abhishek, I'll say this, so this will be really will be the last thing. Amongst people that have those capabilities, as an academic, I have approached some of them who legitimately have demonstrated that they can do those sorts of things and asked them flat out. I said, since this is a real thing and you've demonstrated to me in a way that I find satisfactory as an academic, and I'm not a gullible person, I'm not an easily fooled person. The conditions were set up in such a way that this is not a hallucination or hypnotic suggestion or whatever. I said, why wouldn't you take this to the nearest university and say, I'd like to show you something. Can we study this? Can we blah 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 blah? Can we document how this works and get a scientific understanding of this aspect of what it means to be a human being? I think that would be an extremely worthwhile thing to do. And the answer that I've gotten from people that are like have trained for years and have capabilities like this is all it's going to do is distract people. All it's going to do is distract people from the real thing we're trying to do. So, no, because then people will be running around trying to get magical powers instead of trying to fix their mind. It's not a good thing to do. Think about it like this, right? It used to be that physical yogas, were a secret practice because they were worried people would use it to become rich, become superstars, celebrities, increase their ego, blah, 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 right? The physical yogas of the different systems were kept private between the gurus and the disciples because they didn't want it to become a big show of money and ego and blah 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 and all this stuff. And what happened as yoga got brought into the wider world? It became less powerful, about money, about fame, about, and no longer about spiritual transformation. Nobody in popular, very few in popular yoga circles can actually do any of the things that yoga was intended to do for people, and even in terms of physical yogas, in terms of kriyas and so forth. This is the result, that people take something that is very powerful, meaningful, purposeful, and they turn it into, come join my course for $2,000 and I'll teach you how to throw people around with the force. Right? Or come to my course for $2,000 and I'll teach you how to do yoga. Or come to my course for $2,000 and I'll teach you how to shove chi into people's body and make their body move around or whatever, right? The reason these things are kept private and secret is because the ordinary mind will turn absolutely everything into the way back into samsara, into the way back into suffering, into the way back into meaningless activity and vanity. And then the real thing you were supposed to do, you take, as one of my teachers said, the analogies in the text for this are fantastic. They say it's like making the king get off his throne to sweep the palace floor, right? Taking the thing that should be the ruler of the kingdom and turning it into a servant. Taking the techniques, the methods that can actually get you out of this situation that in theory you've been in forever without beginning, and using it to make $10, right? Think about it. And how many people, especially if they've seen Star Wars, would sign up for a course by some guy for 5 years in order to be able to move people around without touching them, if they knew that was a real thing, with no interest whatsoever in actually going further down the path of training that is the real thing, that is the real reason that those things might develop. So this is the reason. The other thing is, a lot of people, the more open you make it and the more socially acceptable it becomes, the more fakers and frauds and charlatans you'll have, because the charlatans look at anything legitimate and they go, okay, how can I pretend like I have that so that I can charge people money that they'll give me because I'm going to teach them some secret powerful thing? Huge numbers of fake meditation teachers, huge numbers of fake martial arts teachers, huge numbers of fake yogi guys in India and China and everywhere else. Huge numbers of fake monks and nuns. Because huge numbers of cult leaders who say, I have the answer, because there's no way to interrogate whether or not they have the answer. There's a bunch of Indian yogis that are multimillionaires because they do basic parlor tricks like pretending that they can generate holy ashes out of their hand using like first year Western magic tricks like sleight of hand. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the more open and acceptable you make those sorts of behaviors, the more charlatans you have, and the more people get led down the wrong direction. Do I mean Sadhguru? I don't know about Sadhguru. I really don't. I've heard mixed things. Some of the things he says are quite insightful. Some of the practices that he teaches are entirely legitimate practices. I really don't know. I've heard some good things, I've heard some bad things. I don't really have an opinion. Yeah, word. I mean, I don't want to say extremely common amongst practitioners in general, but it's extremely common amongst practitioners who've been doing things for years that they've had experiences that are out of the ordinary, let's say. And if you've been around a long time and you're around other practitioners that have been around a long time who don't normally show stuff off, don't normally talk about stuff, blah, 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 because you're in the crew, they're like, okay, I never get to talk about this. Can we talk about how gurus visit you in dreams sometimes? And then you do the stuff they said, and then it turns out that it works. Can we talk about this? Uh, you know, all sorts of strange things. All sorts of strange, all the things that you thought were just mythology and stuff of the past and all the only thing I would say to sort of jump off of the Sadhguru issue, if we may, the only thing I would say is this, all of the great systems say that all of this stuff that happens is sort of like if you were taking a medication, let's say you're taking a medication to cure your cancer. Okay, you're taking a medication that's meant to cure cancer, right? Not like a really bad one like chemo or something. But let's just say that there was a drug and you would take it and it could cure your cancer. Let's say that, okay, just as an example. And let's say that as a side effect, it made you remember your entire childhood in an extreme amount of detail all the way to the time you were inside your mother's womb. Just as a side effect, right? So like this, the spiritual practices of the great traditions all agree. If you do certain things, there are these unbelievable, interesting, fantastic, crazy side effects that can happen. But that's what they are, side effects. They're not the thing you're trying to do. And if you turn your attention this way and start pursuing the side effects, how can I micromanage the drug I'm taking for cancer so that I can get more memory of my childhood? If you start trying to figure out how much you need to take so you can remember more of your childhood by taking the drug, or I need to take less, or blah blah blah, then you die of cancer in the meantime. Do you understand my point? Because now you're not taking the drug properly that's curing the problem that you have. You're taking it to try to get the side effects that aren't the purpose of the drug. Even though they're positive side effects, if you start chasing the side effect, now it's a problem. So This is the big thing that's agreed upon, as far as I can tell, by the Hindus, the Jains, the Buddhists, the Taoists. I think I don't know about the Sikhs, but I would imagine from the Sikhs that I've spoken to, it's probably the same in Sikhism. There's all sorts of side effects that are interesting, positive, blah blah blah. But they're a side effect. And if you turn your attention over here and focus on just getting the side effects, you don't cure the cancer. You don't fix the problem that using these techniques that you could fix the major thing and you'll get the side effects anyway. You'll get these things anyway along the way. I mean, Jay, to that point, one of my teachers went so far as to say you can go like this and get all these things and maybe never get the result. But if you go like this to try to get the main result, these things happen anyway. So if you want these things, just go for the thing that is the real thing. And other stuff that's interesting will come, right? Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. I know this is a bit of a generally I teach from a meditation from a fairly secular aspect. This wasn't a particularly secular class. But c'est la vie. No, you can do whatever you want. But if you start going up to teachers and asking them how to teach you to, if you go up to real teachers and ask them how to move people around without touching them, they'll probably just tell you to go away. If you ask them to teach you how to train in the thing that's the actual thing, they'll teach you, and then other stuff will happen. And it's not going to happen quickly. It'll happen after a couple decades of hard work, which is the other thing. You probably don't have the endurance to even get the side effect if you want the side effect. This is another point nobody ever talks about. If you want the results that are the side effect, you already have to work really hard for a long time. You understand what I mean? Like you have to work so hard to have all these side effects that aren't even the main thing. And most people who want those, they don't have the type of character anyway to do the difficult stuff required to get the side effects. This is why these capabilities aren't very common in the first place. They're common amongst great meditators. They're not common amongst other people because it's really, really hard to do. Well, DJ, no, he began striving to get celestial nymphs. Then people made fun of him for doing that. Then he practiced more seriously. Then he got some results, and then he realized that pursuing nymphs wasn't a good idea. And then he trained even harder and got the final result. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, my friends. Well, that was a weird class. Hopefully, that was okay for everyone. Sugar free. Why would one talk about this sort of stuff? The only context where I've seen it talked about in a positive aspect is when it's actually helpful for a sort of intermediate to advanced student to talk to them about it. That's the only time I've seen it talked about at any length and sort of the dynamics of it and what you could do with it and what you shouldn't do with it and all this because otherwise it's again you're chasing the side effect instead of the cure. I mean, if you're striving to have a bunch of magical powers, you're not striving for nirvana. Having a bunch of magical powers is within the realm of samsara. It's not within that's not the attainment of nirvana. You know, you gain all of those in the context of samsaric rebirth. So it's still within the realm of the ordinary out of control cycle of stuff. Okay. Yeah, I figured that wasn't for me, sugar, but you know, it seemed like a good question nonetheless. Okay, I really should go, my friends. I have like 30 minutes to study and then I have another class I'm teaching, believe it or not. Okay, thank you all for being here. I hope this class wasn't too weird. Tomorrow there'll be like 2 subscribers and all the comments will be about the Force, but that's okay. All right, see you all later. I would do my normal thing, but this is my cup, my sad white cup today. I've been colonized. Look at this. Okay, one last note because Bluey's comment is actually a really important one. Let me say this because I've studied a number of different things from a number of different perspectives, and then I really do have to go. There's a technique shared in common with, as far as I know, Jainism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Taoist Nadon, and maybe some other systems as well. And basically, it has to do with what this Kundalini style practice. There are ways of doing that practice where things like we've been talking about can be made to happen very, 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 very quickly. But the risk of doing it that way is much, 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 much higher. The reason being that you're changing your system way faster than you can integrate the changes that are taking place. And the risk of you having a psychosis is really high, and the risk of you having basically making really dumb decisions because you haven't gained the result. You've only tasted a small amount of the result temporarily because you've done a technique that makes the certain kinds of results occur very quickly. So Abhishek, yeah, this comes through the Buddhist tantras and Hindu tantras, and again, I think it's there all over the place. As a matter of fact, it's in the Shaolin system for the Lohan palm. That's the Nadon aspect. So Nadon is this same process. So of the much safer way to do it is, for example, in the Nadon way of doing this, instead of making things happen extremely quickly, you slowly, slowly, slowly build up pressure in the system until the system starts to change. And those changes, instead of taking 50 years, take 12 years or 10 years. But if a huge amount of change that's temporary happens in a shorter period of time, like 6 months, or if your teachers have the capability to make it happen even faster than that, there's risk that you're going to damage yourself physically. There's also risk you're going to damage yourself psychologically. So this is part of the reason these things are hidden behind empowerments. It's not because they want to hide things from people or gatekeep it for some traditional reason that doesn't make sense. You can quite literally destroy, just like damage your body really badly, damage your mind. So yeah, there are methods where you can make stuff that's really interesting, so to speak, side effect kind of interesting, happen really quickly, but good luck having a real life after that. Blueies, yeah, Negong, internal alchemy. Yeah. So there's this internal alchemy is sort of a Buddhist shared between the Buddhists and Taoists, in my understanding, in China. So you find it in the Shaolin lineages, and then you find it in a bunch of Taoist lineages. But it is, as far as I can tell, it's basically like a Chinese way of doing Kundalini style practices. But the way that they do it is really safe, really, really, really safe. It's a very intelligent system. And it also is designed not just to be really safe, but it also makes you really healthy. So you can live a long time in theory, as long as you don't get hit by a bus, and you can have a ton of energy to do your practice, and you can generate these internal states that are quite difficult to generate much more quickly, and all of the side effects that some people want happen more quickly, and blah 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 blah, right? So all of this stuff is still being made to happen faster than it would otherwise, but you're doing it in a very safe, slow, gradual way. Also, like Shaolin Lohan Palm, you're changing the whole system and making the whole system, the body, the energy system, ready for those kinds of changes instead of just going to a 6-month course in India and having some guy blast open your central channel and then whatever, doing certain kinds of practices to make something kick off in a matter of weeks or months with no preparation for your system. That sort of thing screws people up. I've met more than one person who has been screwed up, seriously screwed up by things like this. That's why, generally speaking, it's not taught openly. So, anyways, yeah, if you train in a sort of a full-on system for Hindu practices, my understanding of how you do this is there's an intellectual component, there's a physical body preparation component, there's philosophical training component, ethical training component, character training component, and there's also um, then you start working on these other things we were just talking about. Having already gained some concentration, also blah 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 blah. So, anyways, I'm not as familiar with the various Hindu ways of doing this, but again, the overall point is that yeah, you can make you can make all sorts of stuff that's interesting happen in a short period of time, but you're probably going to regret that decision. Right. Okay. I should leave it there. Friends, thank you for attending. I will see you tomorrow, assuming I don't get hit by a bus.